Once you master the combat system in Ghost of Tsushima, you can do some pretty crazy stuff, like this animation canceling that I'll show you later. But first, you need to know the fundamentals. One of the core components of the combat system are the 4 stances. If you don't know how these work, things can get a little frustrating. The key thing to understand is that each stance is intended to match up with a specific enemy type, and give you a way to easily break their block, which staggers them and opens them up for an attack. Take a look through the base level of each stance, and you'll see that they're specifically effective against swordsmen, shieldmen, spearmen, and brutes. Every enemy in the game, including bosses encountered in duels, falls into one of those 4 categories. Well, except archers. Archers are just annoying little but they're really weak and you don't need to worry about a stance for them. Anyway, once you identify which type of enemy you're facing, you always want to be switching to the correct stance to match them, and then use the heavy attack to break their block. 2 or 3 hits with the heavy is typically enough, and then you immediately want to follow up with a quick series of light attacks to finish them off. That's the core combat loop in Ghost. Identify the type of enemy you're up against, switch to the correct stance, break their block with a few heavy attacks, and finish them off with light attacks. If you can get that down, you can honestly get through the whole game. Now, later on, you will encounter some enemies that can change the weapon they're using mid-fight, so you'll want to switch stances to match their current weapon type. There's also some Mongols you'll run into that have dual swords and throw bombs. Those guys count as swordsmen, even though they often stand back like archers. The stances all have multiple upgrades you can unlock, and it's easy to get bogged down trying to figure out which ones are worth it and then trying to master the combos. But honestly, even on lethal difficulty, you don't need stance upgrades. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely fun and you should play around with them later on, but at first, don't worry about them. The critical thing to get used to with stances is just using the heavy attack to stagger the corresponding enemy type. Most of the upgrades are just fun ways to enhance your gameplay. That being said, getting the second upgrade for each stance is really nice to get a significant boost to stagger damage. I recommend doing that with the wind stance first, as spearmen are probably the most annoying enemies to deal with and you'll want to take them out fast. By the way, the best way to deal with them is to wait for their string of attacks to end, dodging each one to the side, and then just do a couple of heavy wind stance attacks. I would also say wind stance is the first one that's worth unlocking its level 3 ability, Spear Defense. Anytime you're attacking with wind stance active, this will auto parry spearman attacks. So basically, if you mistime your attack, you'll be safe. Now, stance upgrades are unlocked by using technique points, but each one of the base levels are unlocked by getting points from killing or observing Mongol leaders. So you'll want to take the time to clear Mongol camps early on where you'll find leaders. And if you observe them before killing them, you'll get 2 points towards stance progression. So you always want to check to see if you have the observe leader objective when you roll up to a camp. You won't always get it because the leader has to be outside and training to be observable, but a lot of camps do have this. Let's back up for a second though, because one of the first decisions you'll need to make is how to spend your first technique points, and there's a handful of abilities you should definitely prioritize. In the Samurai tab, you're going to want the Unyielding Sword and Spear Parry abilities as soon as possible. These change the red unblockable attacks from swordsmen and spearmen into blue parryable attacks. Swordsmen and spearmen make up a lot of the enemies you're going to run into throughout the game, so making their unblockable attacks parryable is a pretty big deal. But to unlock these abilities, you do need to first pick up Perfect Parry. I'll give you some parrying tips in a minute, but in general, don't worry too much about trying to perfect parry. Regular parries have a fairly large window and they'll serve you just fine. Before you can get Unyielding Spear Parry, you'll also need to grab Deflect Arrows, which is pretty useful as well. It simply lets you auto-deflect arrows while holding block. As you've probably already found, those archers can be super annoying. If they're annoying you a little too much, by the way, you can go into the accessibility settings and toggle on the projectile indicator setting. This adds a very obvious symbol to let you know when an archer is about to fire, even if they're off screen. But back in the Samurai tab, you'll also want to grab the roll ability early on so you can get yourself a bit more mobility. Rolling will also instantly stop you from burning, and there's actually a few enemies that can set you on fire, which will damage you until it's out. Resolved Parry is also pretty useful for getting yourself some resolve charge from both regular and perfect parries. Pretty much anything that gets you resolve is worth it because resolve is your main source of healing. Speaking of which, I would also recommend grabbing the Wind of Resolve exploration ability. With this unlocked, you can open this pop-up on the map and select it so your guiding wind will take you to the nearest bamboo strike activity. Completing enough bamboo strikes will add a new resolve charge dot above your health bar, which is way more useful than trying to increase your maximum health with hot springs. I mean, definitely do hot springs when you come across them as well, but just know that the max health gain is really small. So seeking out bamboo strikes to increase your resolve is a much better use of time. And if you find the bamboo strikes frustrating, you can go into the accessibility settings and change the minigame controls to simplified to make them way easier. I'm sure you've also noticed those mythic combat arts. These actually don't require technique points. Instead, you need to complete the associated mythic tale to unlock them, which you can find and track in the journal. And I definitely recommend prioritizing Heavenly Strike. At the cost of just one resolve, Heavenly Strike gives you an unblockable attack that's super helpful against any enemy, including bosses in duels. The Heavenly Strike tale can be found in the Act 1 region very early on, and it's definitely worth getting before you move on to Act 2. You can also unlock explosive arrows by doing the Curse of Uchitsune mythic tale in the Act 1 region. And then Dance of Wrath, which is sort of an upgraded version of Heavenly Strike, is another one you'll definitely want, but you won't be able to get it until Act 2. So those are all the samurai abilities you should focus on early, but we also have ghost abilities. You'll unlock kunai by default at the start, and you'll definitely want to be using those often because they immediately break an enemy's guard and stagger them, making them an easy target. Don't be hesitant to throw kunai either. The game is pretty good about giving you more by looting enemies. In particular, shieldmen and those guys with the dual swords that throw flash bombs will drop kunai. Mongol leaders, which can be any type of enemy but generally have fancier heavy armor, will also often drop kunai. Grabbing the first hidden blade upgrade for kunai is definitely worth it so you can throw two at once. And that does actually turn one kunai into two, so you basically get twice as many for free. After kunai, the next most useful tool is definitely the smoke bomb, especially when combined with the chain assassination skills. Just pop smoke in the middle of a fight and you'll gain stealth, allowing you to quickly and easily take out 2 or 3 enemies. I wouldn't bother upgrading the smoke bomb for a while though. It works perfectly fine at its base level. After smoke bombs, I think wind chimes are the next one to grab, especially if you like to play stealthier. Throwing a wind chime will lure an enemy towards or away from you to pull off assassinations or sneak by them. There's tons of them hanging from buildings that you can snag, so it's very easy to stay stocked up, and you can also get the firecracker upgrade to lure multiple enemies together where you can damage them all at once with something like an explosive arrow. Sticky bombs and black powder bombs are useful too, but I think kunai, smoke bombs, and wind chimes are the top tier ghost weapons. For tactics, we already mentioned prioritizing chain assassinations, but you'll definitely also want to invest in the standoff to get standoff streaks. Not only do standoff streaks let you kill more enemies right at the start of an encounter, but they're also an excellent way to charge up your resolve so you're set to go for the rest of the fight. To get standoffs, you need to approach a group of enemies from a distance and hit the prompt. Generally, you won't be able to trigger another standoff during an encounter after the first, but if all the enemies disengage, sometimes you can get another. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that the first opponent in a standoff tries to bait you into releasing too soon. A good trick to more consistently win is to stare at their feet and try to ignore their other movements. They won't move their feet until they actually attack. Now, the short bow might seem like an afterthought weapon in a game so focused on sword combat, but it's actually really strong once you upgrade it a few levels. Like, you can just body normal enemies with a single arrow, even on lethal difficulty, so you definitely don't want to ignore upgrading and using it. Unlocking concentration is worth it so you can aim more easily, but unless you really like bow combat, I wouldn't bother investing in the additional concentration upgrades until much later. The bow is also an excellent tool for taking out enemies from stealth. Any enemy without a helmet can be killed in one shot to the head with just 1 or 2 upgrades to the short bow, even brutes. And with the heavy arrows on the longbow, which you get from the Curse of Uchitsune mythic quest, you can one-shot enemies with helmets as well. The enemies in Ghost aren't really that smart, so don't worry about them finding bodies you've shot. They'll get riled up for a moment, but they really won't come looking for you or anything. Honestly, when they crowd around a body, it's a good opportunity to blast them with an explosive arrow or some other AoE attack. The last ghost skill I would make sure to upgrade is focused hearing to get far and stealth hearing. I wouldn't go for killer instinct early on though, those points are better spent elsewhere. Armor and charms are also a big part of the combat system, but I want to focus on combat tips, and I covered armor and charms in a couple other videos I'll link below, so we won't spend too much time on them. The main thing with armor is choosing one that has a set of perks that supports your playstyle. Early on you won't have many options, but the Samurai Clan armor is a decent all-arounder that you'll get from a main quest. The next upgrade I recommend is Gosaku's armor, which comes from the Unbreakable Gosaku mythic tale. You'll need the Act 2 region unlocked to finish it, or you could go straight for the Kenshi armor in the Act 2 region by doing the 6 Blades of Kojiro mythic tale. That one and the Sarugami armor, which you'll find on Iki Island through the Legend of Blackhand Riku mythic tale, are my 2 favorites in the game. Whatever armor you choose, make sure you don't ignore upgrading it to enhance its perks. That makes a big difference. You also don't want to ignore getting good charms. These are how you customize your build, and they come from doing tales and completing activities. I'll leave a wiki link below for all the different charm locations. You'll also want to unlock more charm slots by honoring enough Inari shrines. Keep an eye out for yellow trees with foxes at the base who will lead you to the shrines. The gold charms, which you can only use 2 of at a time, come from honoring Shinto shrines, which are marked by these torii gates out in the world and a corresponding symbol on the map. But keep in mind the silver minor charms are honestly some of the most useful. But now that we've got a handle on the basics of abilities, stances, and gear, let's check out some more essential combat tips. Sometimes when you beat an enemy, you'll notice that they aren't quite finished, and you need to end their suffering. Ending suffering gives you resolve, and it's super easy to do, so you definitely want to keep an eye out for opportunities to do it. And if your resolve is already full but your health isn't, it's smart to pop a charge or 2 before you end suffering. Playing stealthy is big in Ghost though, and there's a few tips to keep up your sleeve. First, don't forget that you can climb on all sorts of things, like yurts in the Mongol camps and buildings and settlements to get a sneaky angle on enemies. Once you're up there, you'd be surprised how far you can initiate an assassination from, especially if you jump out towards an enemy and hit the button mid-air. Rolling is also quiet and reduces your visibility like crouching, so you can roll up to enemies to assassinate them if needed. I think a lot of players also miss out on getting the blowgun as early as possible because it comes from a side quest you can easily overlook. In Act 2, you'll meet up with Yuriko for a main quest, but as soon as you're done with that quest, she'll have a series of 2 side quests you can do with her. They're pretty quick, and doing them both will net you poison and hallucination darts. Poison darts just kill an enemy, but the hallucination ones cause them to go crazy and start attacking everyone around them, which is not only fun, but pretty strong against groups of enemies. You won't be able to sneak your way through everything though, and it's important to get that parry timing down to be confident in sword fights. Generally, I try to hit the parry button while the enemy is mid-swing. Trying to hit it right when they start swinging is a little too soon for most animations, and if you wait until their weapon is about to hit you, it's usually too late and you'll take damage. So mid-swing is the best indicator I've found to go off of. Keep in mind that you don't have to tap the block button to parry. It's better to hold it down. That way, if you hit it too early, at least you'll be blocking. Like we mentioned earlier, don't get too fixated on trying to get perfect parries. When you get a brief slow-mo effect, that's a perfect parry, and as you get better at parrying, you'll naturally get more of them, but regular parries are great too. Regular parries are much easier to get and protect you just as well as a perfect one. And even though the enemy doesn't put their guard down for long, if you're quick, you can often still push an attack right after a regular parry. If you do want more perfect parries, there are ways to make them easier with outfits like the Sarugami armor and charms like Mizuno Kami providing a larger window. There's also some fun and more advanced tips you can try out once you're more comfortable with the combat system. For example, in my advanced tips video, I mentioned how you can slash open the cages in camps that have animals or prisoners inside to gain some allies to help you fight, instead of holding the button down to slowly unlock them. A few people pointed out in the comments that you can also use the shoulder bash skill to bust the cages open, and even shoot the locks from far away with arrows if you want to remain in stealth. You can use the bow to shoot some other objects as well, like these red barrels that explode and light enemies on fire. You don't need to use a fire arrow on those, by the way. A regular one will work just fine. It's a bit more situational, but you can actually also shoot hanging braziers to rain down hot embers on enemies, which will light them on fire. The area of effect is actually larger than you'd think, so they don't have to be standing directly under the brazier. Although I do like luring a few enemies under one with a firecracker to burn them all at once. At the very start, I showed you canceling attack animations as well, which is a more advanced technique that allows you to deal damage really fast. There's a few ways to do this, but the easiest one just requires using the light attack and dodge button. To start, stand still and then tap dodge. Then immediately hit the light attack button to get Jin to do an uppercut. Wait just a moment moment to let him swing the sword a bit, and then hit dodge again to cancel out of it. Then quickly hit the light attack button again and keep repeating. So on controller by default, that would be circle and square, or circle and R1 if you're using the melee alternate controls like me. On keyboard and mouse, it's Alt and left mouse button. The idea is to just keep spamming the dodge and light attack buttons, with the dodge button being pressed just slightly before the light attack. Once you play around with it a little bit, you'll realize you can pretty much just spam both buttons at the same time and it'll work. Plus, against certain enemies like Ronin, you don't even have to stagger them first. You can just spam the animation cancel attack and Jin will automatically keep turning to land hits on the enemy, who will sort of be forced to only block you and not attack. Eventually, they'll move in a way that lets you get some damage on them and you can kill them that way. This light attack cancel works with any stance and you can practice it outside of combat. The only issue is you can't have any movement input, so don't hold forward or any other direction. The only movement should come from the light attack animation. So it can be a bit vulnerable in large groups, but it's a great way to blast an enemy's health down after you've staggered them. Now, I know canceling is a bit overkill for the main game. It's honestly something people use more in the Legends mode, but there are a bunch more cool tricks you can use in the main game that are a lot of fun, and we cover them all in this video right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there in just a second.